Thank you, John. So who's here for the first time? Just a show of hands. Well, welcome. We're delighted you're here. Now, you may, in addition to John, and you may wonder, well, what on earth am I doing at this godforsaken hour at the Indian Harbor Yacht Club? And who is GLF? What are we about? Greenwich Leadership Forum. This is, by the way, we're wrapping up our 8th year of existence. So there's some traction, there's some interest in these things that we talk about. And we essentially ask, once a month, we ask one question. We ask the question, what does this Bible that we all read Monday through Saturday have to do with this Bible, which, if we're lucky, maybe we get the services somewhere on the weekend. These two have anything to do with each other. And if you're like me, much of my corporate life, I lived with these completely compartmentalized, completely isolated and separated, never realizing that this Bible really ought to trump this Bible, and this Bible ought to be the guide and rule for life. So we ask, what are the resources, what are the teachings, what are the thoughts, what are the ideas, what are the truths, dare I say, that are in this Bible that have their relevance, whether you're a trader, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a rising young professional, what does our faith have to do with our work? And we would argue at GLF, everything. So as a metaphor, I like to put the Wall Street Journal inside the Bible, recognizing which one trumps which. And to suggest also, by the way, the Bible is not some easy book. You have to struggle with it sometimes. It's sometimes a lifelong quest to try to understand it and its applications. If anyone tells you it's easy, they're trying to sell you something. Part of what we do is month in and month out to try to remember that and to work and learn and encourage each other. We approach these questions, we meaning GLF, out of the Christian tradition, but people from any and all and no traditions are welcome. So whatever your faith journey and story, just be yourself, enjoy yourself, and welcome being here at Greenwich Leadership Forum. I'll set this here as just a brief sort of visual reminder of what we're about. Michael Mahaffey, our president, asked me just to make one housekeeping announcement, and that's that about 3 weeks ago, the GLF board, the newly constituted board of some 15 people, had an offsite where we went up to Grant Gregory's club, Glen Arbor, and spent a day with Howard. Gave us a marvelous facilitation. You think, where do we want to go? What do we want to be doing? Are you correcting me, or you got a thought? Okay. Boy, that sounded like you'd done something wrong. And Jerry, my good friend, would tell me. So, and I do just want to mention that we've sort of set up a couple different structures. We've got a corporate alignment sort of task force or standing committee that Jerry's running. We've got a dinner and special events that Rebecca, George, where are you, that you're running. We have an outreach and technology where Holly Singson, where are you, that is running. And we have a young executives program that Dick and Ann Knox-Richardson, where are you, Ann, are running. If any of these topics interest you, find these board members afterwards. So, with that is our housekeeping. And let's get on to what GLF is about. In a few moments, I'll introduce Jim Lane, our interviewee. Where are you, Jim? Are you hiding? All right, there we go. So I just want to make sure he hasn't flown it. Keep an eye on what you heard. All right. So, we're not too serious here, so we can start with some graphics. Life can be tough. Hopefully your day hasn't started this way. I got it. Hard to complain, right? Now, I love the New York. This is a little hard to read in the back, so it's a couple parents that we're thinking maybe it's time you started getting some religious instruction. There's Catholic, Protestant, Jewish. Any of those sound good to you? On the one hand, I just cringe with it, but on the other hand, at least these parents sort of get it that faith does matter, and hopefully, hopefully you do make some good choices as you go along. I think I have one last one before we start. So the front row has an advantage. You can see it's an iPad. This is neither heaven nor hell, it's the private sector. And that's the world that most of you live in and that I live in. How do we connect the dots between our faith and the work in this purgatory place? I know we have some Catholic priest and friend, where are you, Father Thomas? You can help us with any sort of purgatory questions as a separated brother in the Presbyterian, and you can help me figure this out. But I thought you all might enjoy that. So, just to put things in perspective, our fall series, maybe a little bit hard to read, we kicked off with talking about leadership in crisis, using the 10th anniversary of 9/11 as a springboard for conversation. Today we've got Jim Lane. You'll hear him more fully introduced. Extremely successful ex-Goldman Sachs partner, investment banker, and founder of Canaan Society on 11/11/11. And those of you, particularly who might be a little older, will remember that was a very important day, wasn't it? Veterans Day. And I wanted to find someone who was either in the military or from the military. And David Kim is a very successful investment banker and former West Point grad, and as you can see also was an infantry officer and is a graduate of the U.S. Airborne and Ranger schools, and eventually made his way to Harvard Business School, will be the interviewee next week. And I think he will bring a certain respect, which is certainly owed to all the men and women who served over the years on Veterans Day next month. That's next month, 11/11. Easy date to remember. And finally, we'll wrap up with our Christmas year-end finale, where Larry the Cable Guy will be our guest. I was going to go through some different things that we all know are in the press. I'm not going to do that just in the interest of time, but I would say that Russ Reynolds, where are you hiding? Russ was our first award winner for the last year's GLF dinner as really a model of someone who tries to integrate faith and work. And he just wrote a 376-word piece on leadership, which is one of the best I have ever read. And I just did a blog posting on that, which is what I'm referring to here. So Russ, thanks for that contribution. Jim Lane, would you stroll on up here? And while you are doing that, Kay, would you do a little magic for us here? We have a short introduction before I give a verbal one. And while you're doing that, how about a round of applause for Jim? That's my wife, Karen. She says hello.
Oh my God, I forget that.
A little volume?
I understand. I want to get you there. Yes, that's right. That's right. Yep. I understand. Good at. So 175 and 220. See, that is 175, 175. That sounds pretty good, I think. I like that. Hunter keeps coming. He doesn't win. Finally, he is just, renting his clothes and all of a sudden the heavens open and God speaks and he says, "Son, help me out. Buy a lottery ticket." Just show up, right? Buy your lottery ticket. Let's go. Okay.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, baby.
Aren't those illegal here?
Legal?
Illegal.
No, they're not legal.
But they're Cuban.
They're from Switzerland. Basically been, we need to stop. Your picture.
No.
Huh?
No. Yeah, don't do anything you can do on a normal day then. Might pick up a phone.
Hello. Richard, how you doing? What you doing? I am? Yeah. Literally in the middle of our show, we had to separate the two. We literally had to separate the two guys from each other. You would have loved to have been there because it was like vintage, Of course. So I will see you tonight, my friend. If you send me that stuff ahead of time, I'll try to. I'm not trying to adjust it too much. Fine. Hey, how'd you know? See you, bye.
That really is unfair.
Meet Jim Lane. So, Jim, it's just terrific that you join us. And Jackie, by the way, your daughter who did this, gave us permission, so this has been vetted.
Of course she did.
I was talking with, I won't tell me who gave it to me, but when I was talking with Paul, when he gave it to me, he said, you're in trouble now because if you don't show it, Jack is going to be mad at you. You don't want that. So, Jim, it's wonderful to have you here. And for those who haven't been to a GLF before, we have two different models. Half the time, we'll take something that's gone on in the Wall Street Journal and we'll talk about it. We'll have a sort of reflection on how do we think about that, what role might our faith play to help us encourage us in our business lives and deal with the kind of challenges that we see. And the other half of the time, we have a guest like Jim who has graciously agreed to sit and have a chat with me. So I'm going to do my God Oprah imitation and ask you some questions. We'll have a conversation. And at some point, I'll flip it open to allow everyone to join in with whatever questions you have on your mind. So the general ground rules are any and every question is fair game, but also any and every question you can choose not to answer. So we'll have some fun. But Jim, we met one of your family here, your daughter. You come from a family that's known for progeny. Tell me how many.
Where are we going here, Dave? This is not a good start.
It is not a good start. Well, but everyone's interested. It's a very good start. No. So you and Susie have been married 38 years?
38 years.
That's pretty amazing. And
It's
you
been
have
just a wonderfully smooth ride.
like everyone in here, right? Yeah. Well, you were actually last night we were chatting. Jim and I have known each other for what, 10 plus years or so, a long time. We've each been laboring in a similar field and have fun checking in with each other and checking up on each other. But yeah, life is not linear, is it? Not at all.
It's a journey.
But just so people get to know a little bit of you, those who don't know you, tell me a bit about your family, and in particular, not just your daughters and your wife, but you have a rather storied history which plugs into some, frankly, legendary people, some people who have changed the world. Would you chat about that?
Just by way of background, the Lane family, my grandparents grew up secular and fairly wealthy in Long Island, big New York City wedding and that kind of thing. They had 7 children. My dad was and his twin sister were number 6 and 7, born in Pittsburgh. My dad.
So they come from
But just before my dad was born, they came to faith in Pittsburgh, and have a Pittsburgh story, John. You and I haven't talked about that, but anyway, my grandparents were wonderfully passionate people, really leaders in their community. When they came to faith, it was a big deal.
Because they were sort of a high-end society, inherited wealth.
And my grandmother's family, the Knapps, basically rejected her. They didn't want any born-agains in their family. So she probably had some kind of mental breakdown at the time. That generation doesn't talk too much about that.
Right.
But my grandfather decided to change it up, so he moved the entire family when my dad was 1 from Pittsburgh to Geneva, Switzerland.
As one does.
Where my dad grew up, speaking French. And they did a house church there, homeschool, well before the trend. And they came back to the United States when the oldest got to university level time, and they moved to Wheaton, Illinois.
And it's 7 children, right?
7 children, big house on the edge of campus. My grandfather taught economics at Wheaton for $1 a year, but he had 7 kids, all of whom went to Wheaton. That was the pay. And all 7 of their spouses came from Wheaton. So I've had at least 50 relatives go. I'm one of 5. All 5 in my family got into Wheaton, 4 of us went. So it's a Wheaton evangelical Christian kind of family. But
Your wife is also Wheaton as well?
We met at Wheaton. Yeah.
By the way, the Wheaton Mafia, you guys are pretty amazing. But I always get confused. Are you called the Wheatonians or the Wheaties or what are the Wheaties? Okay, I want to make sure I got this right. But back to your grandparents.
Anyway, so they were right there at Wheaton, and they would open their home every Sunday to 30 or 40 students, and people would come. One of the famous attendees on those Sundays was a very homesick boy from North Carolina whose name was Billy Graham. And my grandmother really was Billy's second mom, and my grandparents mentored him all the way. And in fact, mentioned quite often in the first 100 pages of his autobiography, my uncle introduced Billy to Ruth and was in his wedding. So there's this whole kind of evangelical, fundamental Christian history in my family background.
That's pretty special. And a lot of times if you grow up in that kind of environment, or you hear the phrase PK, a pastor's kid, or MK, a missionary's kid, minister's kid, there's a pushback. At some point you say, this is just constricting me. I don't know how I need to figure myself out. Did you ever go through any of that stuff?
Never.
So tell us about that hypothetical thing which didn't occur.
Well, it's part of the story. I mean, growing up in that environment, we were a very conservative church, Plymouth Brethren, Wheaton College, with that kind of legacy.
By the way, for those who don't know Plymouth Brethren, if you don't know them, they're a church that they don't have ordained clergy. So it's a self-led, very, one might argue, very kind of New Testament model. As opposed to hierarchies.
One would argue that.
One might argue that, yes. Heck of a model.
Well, it's an interesting model because everyone has to kind of show up and be part of it, right?
Hence that phrase, show up, that you're known for.
Exactly.
That Jackie captured.
Yeah, so what question was I answering?
You were answering, you were rebelling.
Yeah, that's a constant theme. You're always safe to come back to that.
When in doubt.
No, so, I pretty much, I was the oldest of five. My mom got ill with the youngest. I actually raised my siblings. It was mostly, there was 4 boys and a girl. My dad was one of the boys, so we were all athletes. That was kind of one big frat party. But I had to kind of do my thing, right through Wheaton, right to Wall Street. Was successful relatively early. That's all good news. But the one thing that I don't think I was I know I wasn't prepared for was success, especially early.
Say more, what do you mean by that?
And so, kind of this rebellious streak, but always kept it in check. Maybe had to keep it in check.
Right.
But once you become a partner at Goldman Sachs, once you actually have real money, once you actually can say, what, to people, to things, to life, now you're in control completely. I acted out. I misbehaved. I am not proud of some of my, I don't know, but some of my. It just like I had made it, and had made it early, and I didn't like the way I was handling it, and that was a lot of one could say that was a lot of pent up
right.
All those years of kind of being held down, suppressed, kind of the church do it this way, and not actually talking about it. So.
Yeah. And were you self-aware that your life was sort of spiraling into this new pattern, and sort of fighting it, or had you kind of?
Well, I never ever lost my faith ever. I mean, I came to faith just shy of my 5th birthday, and was very committed to this basically all the way through, and actually lived it out for a good part of my career. But there was this period of when I kind of finally made it, I kind of conveniently set my faith to the side. Never lost it. Still love Jesus, but I thought maybe I'll just see what this other stuff is about, what life is, and so effectively experimented with what the world had to offer a little bit, so to speak. But never lost it, and was fighting the whole time through it. Just fought through it.
How'd that experiment work out?
Well, I'm here on the other side to say it worked really well. Look, we all go through some periods in our life, but not one of us doesn't. This is a journey. We all struggle. I actually think, as painful as it was, without that, I know I wouldn't be where I am today. Because life was too easy. Life was too predictable. It had happened too easy for me. And I had never really been tested emotionally. I grew up in a family of all boys. That was one big frat party. Goldman Sachs was one big male frat party at the time. And I had a wife and 3 daughters and 2 dogs, both female, at home. And I didn't know what to do with that. I had no clue. I'd say I had 4 moms, actually 5 moms. checking in on Jim, right? I didn't know, I didn't really know how to relate as I probably wanted to, should have. And, this again, that process, to me, Christianity, after all these years, I've come to realize Christianity is relationship. That's all. And men suck at it. We don't, we are genetically inferior to women in the relational field.
Unpack that.
Did you know that?
It's funny, Karen and I were just talking this weekend.
I often quote from a book called The Female Brain by Luann Brizendine, a neuropsychiatrist. She's at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and spent a lot of time at Yale and Harvard. And you know that we started, you and me, started as females? That's why I like to think, by the way.
One of the things I love about these interviews, I have no idea where they're going. And this is one of those things.
8 weeks into conception, excess testosterone we're bathed with, and we become males. And the communication center and the hearing cortex shrinks.
We didn't need science to tell us that.
And the part of the brain that controls sex doubles in size. These are true facts, right?
Okay, yeah.
And I wish I had known this before my girls came along and before I got married. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But, that's kind of how and why McCain Society started. We need to be together and struggle through friendship and relationship, understand what Christianity is and our faith is really about.
Well, let's talk about this thing called McCain Society. Many of you we share many friends between NCS and GLF. It started the better part of 17 years ago, right?
Yeah, January 1995.
And it was met in your house for many years.
For 9 years, yeah.
And so what's going on? Explain this, and it's
well,
what was
coming out of the story that I was just giving about myself. I had moved my family from London to New Canaan, and had met some new friends in town here in Fairfield County, and just felt a real need, reflecting back on what I was just referring to. I just, for the first time in my whole life, I actually had some time to think and reflect. And I realized, I don't want to feel the pain I felt, and I don't want to misbehave like I did, and I want to really set myself on a course that makes sense. What was I lacking during the last 20 years that could have helped me avoid the pitfalls along the way? And I came to the conclusion that the one thing I didn't have was strong male friendship. Guys in my life who understood the stress of a Goldman Sachs, but also were really committed to their faith. And so I gathered a few of those guys, and we just started meeting for breakfast in my home. We didn't know what the heck we were doing. We kind of still don't know what we're doing. And we're just meeting. We just want to be friends. We want to help each other, support each other, hopefully to be better husbands and fathers, starting there, but also to be better men in the marketplace, to step up to our partnership in the community, to support the local church, and just be men, be leaders, do what we're supposed to be doing spiritually. Right.
And many of us here might be members of a church. Some are very active, some in leadership positions, some casual members from time to time. We go to church. But the church, it's fair to say, for all of her important role, in modern times at least, seems to struggle with how to reach out to men. And I think in this way you're catching a bit of a void, perhaps, even for many people who are active in a worship community.
Yeah, it's. I think the church has some structural issues. We won't go into that, but we're often called on for primarily one thing, and that would be our wallets. And so, sometimes we men don't feel it's safe. I think it's fair to say. And so, it's good for us to get together where there's no expectation. The three big ones for men are money, sex, and power, and we take all three of those off the table in our gatherings.
And when you say take off the table, what do you mean by that?
Well, there are no women in the room, so we can act sane.
You don't have to show up for whoever's there.
There's no expectation. The model is just everyone getting together. There's no financial need or small financial need, so money is not an issue. And it's just a flat organization in that sense. It's a movement, really. It's not even an organization. It's just guys get together. So those three issues are just not in the room. So guys can come and feel comfortable and share their stuff completely, right? And I think at the end of the day, that is the starting point for real faith. To get real about who the hell you are, how broken we are, and be able to share that with at least one other person, if not a group of guys, and then to do it authentically in community, because God is community. There's three of those guys, and I want to be part of that club. They made me and you for that, and I'm spending a lifetime journey figuring that out.
It's real powerful. A lot of people, I remember when I was doing some of my seminary studies, one of the biggest lectures that the students struggled with, and probably many in this room, is this thing called the Trinity. You talk about those three guys. I assume that the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and not Larry Curly.
Well, did you go to seminary?
Well, I was the guy in the back row going, oh man, I don't understand this. But I just want to make sure you weren't meaning Larry Curly and Mo. But there is this profound thing, actually you and I were just talking about this profound thing of the relationality. There's a Greek word, perikorosis, that means the divine dance between the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we're called to be in relationship both with God and each other. And that's what I think you're in your own journey. It sounds like you've been striving to figure that out as well.
You just summarized the entire Christian faith. Right there.
Wow.
Yeah, in my view, and the triune God, the three-part God. Tim Keller in May did a two-part series on it. I highly recommend it, called The Triune God. And Larry Crabb writes a lot about the Trinitarian theology. I would recommend both highly. Both of them are on our advisory board. But I've been a Christian for 55 years, and I'm still trying to figure all this out, right? I mean, and until May, I've heard, I don't know, probably hundreds of sermons on the Trinity. And until I heard Tim's discussion of that and how they treat each other and how they live in relationship with each other, did I really, really fully understand wow, they created me for that, to be part of that. They didn't need me, they had each other. They didn't need me to sit there and worship. And they didn't need worshipers, they didn't need workers, they didn't need me for relationship. They wanted to share their eternal, perfect love of each other with me. And when you put Jesus' sacrifice in those terms, I always thought, wow, what a painful death. Yeah, it was a painful death, but much more meaningful in a way was him just leaving that perfect partnership, friendship, relationship, love of the Trinity and having it come and dwell among us morons. Really, And so think about kind of eternal relationship with him. I don't know, to me, I'm just trying as best I can to figure it out here with you, with John, with Paul. I want to love you guys, and I want to have a relationship with you. And as I said, for men and how I'm built, that's a really hard thing for me to do. But that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, think of most of you when you leave here, you're going back into your offices, men and women. Obviously, you're speaking very much from a male experience, but women saying, we're going back in the office, and we're not going to hear the word love probably for the next 12 hours. We're not going to hear the word God, and if we do, it will be followed by the word damn it. We're going to be talking about transactions and deals, not relationships. So we get enculturated in a sometimes very stimulating and sometimes very valuable work life, but these things are missing, and yet that's what we were built to do, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I am saying that, and I'm also would encourage you that I think, we hear the church telling us to be salt and light, and I think if you had that kind of attitude about your faith and understanding of kind of the relational aspect and just take it into the workplace, I think you can be exactly that, salt and light. You can be a real leader. People are just drawn to someone who's that kind of engaged and engaging. And after NCS started, I went back into the workforce. Kurt Welling, who was here, recruited me to come back, and I worked for.
Is this SocGen?
Yeah, Societe Generale and SG Capital Partners, and there was 5 partners in the little private equity thing I built, but New Canaan Society was the 6th partner. My Jewish partner sent more people, more men to NCS that came to faith than almost anyone at that time. Because from Thursday at 5 p.m. to Friday at 10 a.m., I was off the grid, and they knew it. Everyone knew it, because that was NCS time. And it just becomes part of the normal work, ebb and flow of the workplace. You can do that and take it right in there and really make a difference right in the workplace.
And what's that difference look like? I think a lot of us struggle with, okay, at a minimum I want to carry myself well, but what's that extra light you're talking about, that salt?
I think it really comes down to kind of your security in Jesus. I mean, it's your own personal faith journey. If we're really, really secure in our faith, I think we just live it out, because at the end of the day, even when I was at Goldman, I used to go to Goldman thinking, isn't this fun? This is just a game anyway, who cares? What is this in light of eternity, right? I've got eternity in front of me, and God placed me here, thank God, and I'm going to go for it, I'm going to be bold and humble. The humble part, I lost it a few times along the way. But I'm going to be bold and humble for Jesus, and we'll just see where it goes. So if you have that attitude where it's not, it doesn't matter. It was given to you by God, taken by God, and you're just going to serve Him as best you can right where you're placed. That was my calling, to be at Goldman Sachs. Most people in church 25 years ago would have said, what? I think they're getting there now because of your work, among others, right? Which is great. But right where you're called, that's where Jesus wants you. And just be that salt and light.
Elaborate a bit on that, because this idea of calling, many of us who were raised in the church tradition, or even if we haven't, we think of, well, calling, that's the missionary in Africa. That's the person with the collar around the neck. Those are the callings. And indeed, they are callings. But what you're saying, and I obviously, fully agree, that we could be called to the marketplace. And those callings are every bit as holy as being called to the priesthood.
Oh yeah, I don't forget, I went to Wheaton College, so all my fellow graduates, most of them were going to be pastors or missionaries. Since that was during Vietnam, some decided to start their own communes, but no one was going to business school. No one.
So you're actually, and you in fact did have a choice, seminary or it's turned out Columbia.
But my family tradition was very clear, way back, which is, you serve God right where you're placed. And that's a little bit the Plymouth Brethren tradition. 1 Peter 2, 9 through 12, you are royal, chosen generation of royal priesthood. Each one of us is a priest. Why don't we live that way? We don't need a priest between us and Jesus anymore. The veil was rent twain at his death. And we can now have direct access. And that's what I want to be a priest starting in my home. But in the workplace, in the community, with each other. I want to do that. I want to live my faith out.
And how do you, when you're back at your Goldman Sachs days or Societe Generale or other things, Devon Woods, or business projects that you're still involved in, how do you thread that needle of not being one of those obnoxious faith people that just make you gag before they finish their sentence, where they just are so convinced that they've got the truth and you need to know it, and you end up scaring the whole world away?
Yeah,
Did you think about that?
All the time. I think one of the best treatises on that I read, many maybe were James Hunter at University of Virginia. He wrote a book recently, To Change the World. That was an ironic title, and talked about a concept called faithful presence.
Faithful presence.
And I really resonated with that, which is kind of how I've been living my life up until that point anyway, but he kind of put words to it. He's a sociologist down there and a brilliant intellectual. But really, he's talking about us being just faithfully present where we are, in the home, in the workplace, your question. And just be faithfully present, just be Jesus there, and not proselytizing, not evangelizing, just in how you live your life, and how you make decisions, and how you just basically infuse the joy of the gospel, because you know that this is not your destiny, this job or this deal or whatever. You've got eternity ahead. You can live in a way freely that many others can't. And that will be seen. I mean, even when I showed up to my first job, people would say, like, gosh, you seem so calm. It's hard to believe that they'd say that now. but we can be. We know that this is not what we're called, maybe, to be a faithful presence at a place, but that's not our eternal destiny. So we can look beyond it. And it gives you, freedom.
There's a friend of mine that said, maybe you've heard the saying, I don't know how original it is, but he said, you may be the only Bible someone ever reads. How we carry our lives, what we do, what we don't do, what we say, how we handle transactions and relationships in the corporate spirit. We may be the only Bible they ever read.
Yeah.
You mentioned quite rightly, like all of us, myself included, life is not linear. There's successes, there's failures, we shoot some own goals. We do a couple while we're staying in sports metaphors. We wish we could do a mulligans and play a couple shots over. Any shots you would wish to play over?
Well, certainly there are many.
We don't have that much time, Joe, so let's just do one or two.
There are many. But I think look at the time in my 30s when I was actually most successful, which I referred to already.
Right.
If I could have that time over and redo it, if I could have had the friendships that I now have back then, and kind of navigated all the stuff I was facing then, life would have been a lot different. I would have been a lot more successful in worldly terms ultimately, have a lot more money ultimately. But guess what? New Canaan Society would not have started, and kind of this wrestling that now there are thousands of men involved wrestling like me with their relational faith. I don't know. I also wouldn't give that up.
Right.
To sacrifice that.
Well, and there's, as you know, the great promise of the Christian tradition, and in fact the Jewish tradition as well, is out of brokenness, out of evil, God will bend it towards good. Out of mistakes, God is present and prepares new things. So out of this crucible and these crisis times in our life is often when the generative new life and new hope begins. Would we like to avoid that crucible? Absolutely.
I don't think you can grow spiritually without it. How's that first statement? That's my experience, and that's how I read the Bible. I mean, everyone says, look at David, and Joshua, and all these guys. Yeah, they all faced it. No one through it, because God was getting them really ready, right? And I actually think that's when our spiritual growth really happens. Goes and starts in spurts. So I actually embrace the pain now. I mean, I'm still living with lots of pain created from years back, right? Relational pain, kids are struggling here and there. Marriage has been up and down, and so on. I keep beating myself up for woulda, shoulda, coulda. The usual, that kind of thing. But boy, I wouldn't trade it actually.
That's big stuff. That's big stuff. You used the phrase when we were chatting last night about AA meets Goldman Sachs, which is sort of a jarring kind of concept.
Well, it's kind of appropriate, Damon.
Yeah. Would you unpack that both at a personal level and at an NCS level?
Well, the personal level is just that I'm an alcoholic and I've been to rehab. And the interesting thing is I went to rehab well after NCS started. And it's been a big part of the journey. I actually.
And next week is your 7th anniversary.
Yeah, next month is, yeah.
Congratulations. But
some of you saw in my bio that I'm I'm living now in Dorset, Vermont, which I've had a home there for 25 years, actually. But Dorset is the birthplace and now the burial site of Bill W., the founder of AA. And I go over to the hallowed hall where he grew up for meetings and stuff. But AA has a big part of the New Canaan Society's background just because we are guys just getting together, sharing our stories, right? Some guys have alcohol issues, but they have all the other issues. It's not about alcohol, it's about our sin and our failure to kind of surrender our lives to God in full. But the AA meets Goldman Sachs, that's really kind of how this thing has evolved. It started as a group of 8 guys basically in my family room, met for 9 years there, grew to about 200 or so. Yes, I do have a saintly wife, and met there every week. And finally got too big and we moved it out. Here we are 17 years later, and there are 35 chapters around the country of men who want to do this themselves. We have 2 annual retreats or conferences, now East Coast in Washington. Some of us just came back from a West Coast one that we've kind of hooked up with a group of guys from Seattle down to LA.
I probably shouldn't use the word hooked up anymore in modern language, just,
Well, San Francisco.
So, yeah, spend a lot of time with college kids that
San Francisco, Manhattan.
Jim, your journey is just taking new turns. This is great.
But just to finally answer your question, because we now have enough, there's enough growth and bulk to it, we actually had to think about governing ourselves.
Right.
And we don't want to govern ourselves. We don't want to build another organization. We are a 501c3 legally, but we didn't want to build a big infrastructure. People had encouraged me to become the executive director, build a nonprofit, a budget, a staff, and all that stuff. And I rejected that, actually, because I didn't want to change sides from giving money to raising money. And I thought we didn't want to kind of be burdened with the bureaucracy of something like that. So we really view ourselves as a movement. So we look to the AA model. You know, there are 5,000 meetings every week of AA in New York City. And it's a global movement, right? And they all fund themselves, they all come together, they're all, they have a small little corporate kind of national thing going on with some publishing and stuff. So then the Goldman Sachs pieces, we put together an operating group of 10 chapter leaders from New York to LA who manage the business of NCS. And of course, we're all chapter leaders and volunteers. And we have a small 2.5-person staff. So we're impacting thousands of men across the country for several $100,000 a year. And that's the AA meets Goldman Sachs model you were referring to.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. I appreciate it. In a minute, I'm going to open it up to just questions and anything that are on your mind to throw at Jim. As a former investment banker, finance guy myself, there's the last question that you always ask in due diligence, as you will know, is what should I have asked you that I didn't? What should I or would you like to ask that you might just want to share as we shift into questions from folks?
One of my best friends always asks this question. So David, why don't you share with the group the sin you most struggle with?
Wow. Wow.
So why did you ask that? And I'm not going to answer that. Because we're in a mixed crowd. But that question, I do answer with my brothers. And that's the point of it, right? The point of it is we got to get real, open, honest, transparent, and authentic. As I often say, we just want to be authentic about our inauthenticity. We want to show up and be in each other's lives. And until you can share intimately from your heart, no rules, no walls.
Right.
You can't really go there. So,
That's.
did I dodge it okay?
No, actually, it was a terrific. In fact, let's all park that question with a blank and ask it of yourselves as you leave here today. Let's shift questions. Who has something to ask? Front and center. You go first, man.
Hey, brother.
This is part A. in regards to my question.
Keep them short and sweet, by the way.
Yeah.
So let's just have one question, short and sweet.
The ethics of demo and capital, how are you synergizing that into other?
How am I synergized?
The ethics of development capital.
No, it's just, demo capital is just my own investment firm. I'm just investing. So it's no different than any other.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just investing, and I'm just in making sure that what I'm investing in actually, is the right thing. I don't think about it in an ethical sense. I mean, I'm not investing in, things I should be investing in. As I go about living in the workplace in the normal course, I don't do the investing any different. I'm just in and of the world trying to make the best judgments I can with my Christian worldview in mind.
Other questions? Who wants to jump in?
You're going to go with my next?
No, hang on one sec. I might come back to you, but who wants to jump in with a question? Yeah, way back there.
Religion is front and center in the Republican presidential primaries. Just be interested in your view of how the media is responding to that and the debate itself. Where does religion belong in the presidential primary?
I think you all heard the question with a great, wonderful, loud voice. Thank you. The role of religion in presidential politics in particular.
Well, I think this country was founded on Christian principles, and that's a great thing. But there really is separation of.
I forgot to mention for the newcomers that Admiral Boone always shoots off at this hour, so no, it's not an attack. Sorry, new folks. All you oldsters are not.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that question any longer. It comes back to what I mentioned. Personally, for me, it comes back to what I mentioned about James Hunter and faithful presence. A politician, a business guy, whatever. We should be faithfully present, living our faith out. We shouldn't be proselytizing. We should be living it. So my faith is very important in how I view the world. But I don't do litmus tests, for example. I don't believe in that. I believe in living, we're holistic, integrated people. And so that's just the way I view politics, the way I view business, is the way I view how you approach life in general. If that makes sense to you.
Martin Luther, the great reformer, not quite on this point, but what you were saying, he was asked, should Christians buy shoes only from Christian cobblers as opposed to from pagan cobblers or other cobblers, the Sarsen, the Muslims?
I actually view that question as obnoxious.
Well, do you know,
the question is obnoxious. I mean, no, but that's the point, I think.
Yeah.
Well, why are we even doing that? Right. We are all, every one of us, all 6 billion on this planet, we are made by Jesus for a relationship with Him. All of us. Doesn't matter what your faith tradition is at all. So you're my brother, whether you're Muslim or Christian, period. And that's what I'm preaching.
And I think you would like, Luther didn't quite answer it that way, but he said you should buy the shoes from the best shoemaker.
That's exactly, no.
Which is another way of saying what you said.
That's exactly.
It's the wrong, the question is the wrong question.
Yeah, well, no, yes, but that's the answer I would have given because I like Martin Luther.
He loved a good time, by the way. He would have been a great NCO.
Is he a cigar guy?
He was an everything guy.
Good.
So, other questions? Yeah, back there. Thank you.
You asked a little bit about what you struggle with most, and I'll kind of ask this question this way.
We're glad to take your confession, brother.
We're going to get near it, and that is having the daily humility. How do you struggle with having the daily humility to be where Christ puts you?
Yeah. That's a really wonderful question. And let me tell you, that is the daily struggle, right there, summarized. I tell myself every day I want to be bold and humble. Bold and humble. And the humble part comes, the bold doesn't come with great difficulty to me.
You've never been accused of being bashful.
Yeah, the humble piece does. Yeah. But I want to live my faith out boldly, but not proselytizing, just living it as salt and light. but I want to be humble. And I think the faith journey can be summarized as, look, at the end of the day, we are born as very independent creatures, fending for ourselves, trying to figure it all out, and kind of being self-absorbed. And the whole journey is getting off of that self-absorption and getting to the point where we're God-absorbed and we're totally surrendered, as Oswald Chambers would say. That is the journey, and every day I struggle with that.
Please.
All businessmen have business plans. How is the Spirit messed up yours?
All businessmen have business plans. How is the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, messed up yours? The old saying, people planning, God laughs. So yeah, interesting question.
I mean, are you referring just to my life, to NCS, whatever? On the NCS side, I think the best news about NCS is we've never had a business plan. It's nothing but, it really is a movement, and it really has been led by the Spirit. And we've thought about planning. We've come together and plan. We've kind of, every time we do that, God reminds us that He's in charge. And we've made many, many, many mistakes, learned from all. But so far, anyway, we haven't made any lethal mistakes. But we've come to the conclusion that if we just show up in community, God will take care of the rest. And that's what's happening. So it works pretty well, actually.
Which for many of us in this room, probably very driven, type A sort of people, this concept of letting go,
really
letting
hard.
God is not easy. It's not easy. Yes.
Your comment about where the Lord places you. What about where we place ourselves through our fallen states?
Say a bit more. What do you mean?
Well, your comment, your question was so pertinent. How do you not deal with, but how do you function in the state or in the place where Jesus has put you? Right? That was the comment that we asked. And my thought from that question was, or how do we best reconcile or serve Jesus the best in the place where we have put our own selves through our own fallenness, and are we, and that's a big issue as at least many of us journey through life, not only where has Christ put us, but how have we fallen short, or where have we allowed ourselves to be put, or to put ourselves as a function of our own
So
shortcomings and failures.
how can you assume place X is where you put yourself versus Jesus?
So in a sense,
I mean, you assume that you've chosen and Jesus wasn't part of that decision. I would tell you my own view is I think you're selling Jesus short a little bit. I think He knows exactly where you are, and He does give you a choice, and we make bad choices. But
That's exactly what I'm.
He makes bad choices, but He's in it all, right? You see, and some of the worst choices I made turned into the best things in my life because somehow He does that. So He's in it all. I think I try every day to kind of be in the Spirit to try to figure out where God wants me and what God wants me to do. But every day we will make that mistake because we keep coming back to ourselves. But God is in it all. That's the comforting thing to me. He's in it all. And so, and He's trying to teach us kind of to start with Him as opposed to starting with ourselves. It would save us a lot of work and effort in the long run.
and maybe that's sort of a way to think through with your good question. When we make decisions which are not God-pleasing decisions, when we do some stupid or suboptimal things, let's put it that way, I think your connection point that we're not alone, and that's how we get through it, that God will bend that purpose and that bad decision towards His goodness. And it may take a while, and there may be a wilderness period. Some of the great stories, Jesus Himself included the wilderness patches, the wilderness times, out of which has come some of the greatest fruition, the greatest strength, the greatest ideas. So it's no fun being in the wilderness. It's not like a happy camping trip. Wilderness is desert time, but out of the desert ultimately springs flowers and life. So we're just going to see if someone else wants to come in first. Yeah.
Jim, you've obviously read a lot of books, and I'm very impressed by that, and I know you will. What would you recommend is, the most recent book you've read that's powerful in terms of being able to take your faith and put it in action?
And take your
Question,
pick.
what of the many books you've been reading, which one is one you'd recommend that it connects to some of the themes here tonight, this morning?
Well, there's been many, but I think probably the one that I've been dwelling on most recently is, I mentioned earlier, Larry Crabb. If you know Larry Crabb, you're probably aware of his Inside Out book, which is kind of his famous one.
He's a psychologist, writes a lot on relationships, out of a Christian lens.
He's a Christian
worldview.
psychiatrist.
If you don't know who he is.
Psychologist living in Denver. He's on our advisory board now, good friend, become a good friend. Spoke at our recent California conference. And he's he basically speaks all over the world. But he's been doing a whole series on kind of relational aspects of our faith. And so Connecting is a book that we're spending a lot of time on, and that was written probably 10 plus years ago. What are some of the other titles?
Shattered Dreams.
Yeah, Shattered Dreams. Pressure's Off is an unbelievable one, because so many of us think that we've been taught, rightly or wrongly, or we've perceived that Christianity has become a series of rules, right? And we know we can't live there, and we keep failing, and we have this cycle. This doesn't work. So Pressure's Off is a good one on that. Shattered Dreams, if you've had some problems along the way like I have, that's a good one to kind of get you back. But Connecting and now Soul Talk is another one. Those two books, Connecting and Soul Talk, and then there's one other, how to build a spiritual community. Those are all kind of fundamental things for what we're doing at NCS, so it's one of the reasons I'm currently focusing on, because it's really about how do we relate one to another. That really is the Christian faith, that right there. And it gives you a language to deal with that. It's hard, especially for men. We don't kind of know how to deal with it. So those are serious.
Before the question, this reminds me of Connecticut's motto, which many people don't know, which is once transplanted, you get sustained. It's like scattering the seeds to the wind. Every seed is just as able to land in the soil and actually bloom from there.
Maybe that's why we started in Connecticut.
But I don't know.
I know I had that in mind.
Like you, I lived in Europe for many years and been around the world, and you especially in some places where you can't imagine why anybody would want to live there. And they call it home. And we're all the same seed.
There actually is a reason I think that NCS started in Connecticut. George Barna about 10 years ago came out with a survey. He's like the George Gallup of the Christian world, if you don't know him. And he's been surveying the Christian church for 25 years. Came out with a survey 10 years ago. Connecticut had the least percentage, as a percentage of the population, there are less Christians here than any other state in the country. Right? So it's kind of, I think, fascinating that NCS started here.
When was that? When was that determined?
That was 10 years ago, approximately. I don't remember these. It was about 10 years ago. George Barna, you can go on his website. He publishes this stuff all the time. He's got a research firm based out in LA.
So we've got GLF and NCS planting in that seed, that turf. Good stuff, good stuff. One last question. Anyone got one? Who wants to go? Yes, please.
Just a comment. I really
Uh-oh.
appreciate so many things, because I think you have spoken all the truth. And one of them is that you spoke about being authentic. I think the world is really inundated by people who believe a lie. We're all trying to be the best person. We're trying to be so spiritual. We're trying to impact on something that we're not. And actually, God sees through it all. So the real way in my understanding of how to get our answers prayers is that we totally in inner intelligence with God.
Thank you.
What did you say?
If you didn't all hear that the message was what she's really taken away from Jim's time is the importance of being authentic. We live in a world where we aspire to be the best, and often that means we're no longer authentic. We're living a lie, and we're being someone that God didn't create. And she's embracing Jim's.
My response to that is amen. Amen. Thank you.
We have a covenant with the GLF that we stop punctually at 8:15. We're 1 minute away from that. We'll do two things before we wrap up. One is we'll give Jim a huge round of applause, and then I'll send us off with a blessing. So, Jim, thank you. You could tell from the heartfelt applause, I think you touched a lot of nerves, and I thank you for that. So let me now send us off all with a blessing. May you go into your places of work and find God already there waiting for you. May you answer that due diligence question that Jim put on the table. What's the biggest sin we struggle with? May you let God help you with that. And may you be real. Go in peace. Go in the ministry of the work world. Thank you all. We'll see you next month.